everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Sunday Devotionals. This is the series that we started at the beginning of quarantine, and now we're back in quarantine, and at least I am. And yeah, so it's so many weeks later, and it's kind of crazy.
It's the 4th of
But
July.
yeah, that's right. But Chris, you're here, and you got to get out of quarantine this week. I'm proud of you.
Yes, just a little bit. And what's funny about it, so I helped my little brother-in-law move to New Mexico, and I got back, and just days after I got back, the governor of New Mexico said anybody traveling in must self-quarantine for 2 weeks.
Oh
And I
my
was like,
gosh.
oh, I just barely missed that. That would have kind of stunk, especially since I'm only
Yeah,
there for 3 days. But
right.
still, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So anybody, even whether it's because they were doing that for plane travel, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
because
And then
you'd
thankfully I
driven.
didn't go in by plane. I came in by road. And then right
Uh-huh.
after I left, they switched it coming in from anywhere else, whether by plane or car. You must self quarantine for 14 days. And it's like, wow, just barely missed that one. But look at me, still
Oh,
healthy.
wow. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You don't have the coronavirus yet.
No.
Knock on wood. Well, very good. We decided to do something a little bit different today, try something out, see what you guys think. And since we both are movie people, I I thought it would be fun to talk about a spiritual movie today and see again what you guys think of this. And today we're talking about the film All Saints. And this is a very rare movie that's a faith-based film that actually has a high Rotten Tomato score, including my own review, my own fresh review. This is 2017, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about not only what we thought about the film, but also why we think it's better than a lot of other faith-based films. The movie, it's a true story about a pastor, Anglican pastor, that gets a small congregation in Smyrna, Tennessee, and it only has like 10 to 12, 10 to 15 regular attendees, and he's sent to close down the church, but he finds out that there's this whole group of Karen refugees, which is, I guess, a group out of Laos, I believe. And he starts to get more and more involved and decides to start this farm for them. And yeah, so we'll talk more about it. But overall, what were your overall thoughts about this movie?
Overall, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was watching it with my wife, and you could tell there's moments where they indicate that the pastor stopped and prayed, but you don't actually see him praying. And so my wife is like, you need to pray with all the stuff. Like when things are starting to go south, she's like, pray. Why aren't
Yeah,
they showing us praying? And she kept
that's
citing
true.
this movie. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Faith Like Potatoes. I thought that one was all right. But, she's like, they prayed a lot in that movie. Why aren't they praying in this one? I was like, I get it. I think they're indicating he's taking time here, but yeah. But otherwise,
Yeah,
I thought it was a good story. I thought they did a good job, like attaching you to the characters, so you cared about each character and what they were going through. So overall, I was entertained by that movie. And anytime I go into a faith-based film, I have trepidation because is this going to be the really, really bad one, or is this one going to be okay? And I was very happy that this one was
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah. I thought we talked about that up front, is talk about why we think this is better than most faith-based films. And for me, what makes this better, first of all, is that it's very, I would say, an untidy faith.
Yes.
That and things really don't go well for them at all. Like he feels this distinct prompting to start this farm, and in a typical faith-based film, then that it would everything would kind of go right, and he would be and the answers to his prayers would be there, and it would be this obvious result of him being faithful. But everything goes wrong. I mean, that could go wrong, and that's the true story. But I think that really helps it to have more poignancy for me. Is that like living? God does not want weak saints, and
Yeah.
sometimes it can seem like, how can you not answer this prayer? How can you not be there for these people that have given up so much? But that's where faith really comes in strong, and that I think that helps it a lot. Is that it's I would say untidy.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. The other thing that helps a lot is that it just told the story. I think a lot
Yeah.
of faith-based films, they don't tell you the story. You know, they begin to tell you the story, and then it's like the movie stops and they're like, wink, wink. Did you see that? Did you see the symbolism in that scene? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's just hit you over the head with it and really explain it right now, just to make sure that you got what we did there. And I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
faith-based films do that. They're telling a story, but they stop telling their story so that they can preach their message. Once they feel
Right.
like they've preached sufficiently, they continue telling the story. And I think one of the things that is compelling about All Saints is exactly what you said, because you get that uninterrupted. Like, they don't stop to try to preach you this message or tell you this, or what they're telling you the story the whole way through. So they're
Mm-hmm.
showing this man wrestle with his faith. They're showing and not telling. And I think that's way more compelling, and it's what makes the characters even more relatable, is the fact that you are seeing their struggle, and you can sit there and say, yeah, I've done that, I've prayed, and sometimes I felt like I didn't get the answer. And so I think there's something about that movie where telling that story and not just, you know, stopping to preach a message, but actually letting you see it unfold and bringing you in with the character is what makes it that much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that even if you're not religious, like many of these critics that enjoyed the film, aren't typically fans of these films in this genre. I think you can enjoy the film because who can't relate, even if you're not religious, to things just not working out, like to having a goal, feeling really inspired, and then things just seemingly for whatever reason not working out, and how frustrating that is. And it also has a real community spirit behind it, that sometimes you don't get. That there's Baptists helping with the farm sale, there's a farmers market, there's people who don't believe anything helping with the farmers market, and
Yep.
that's fine, and they're welcome, and there's no sort of shaming them. And I think sometimes faith-based films, they get too kind of concerned about the ministry that they have, and that what they want to do, that they forget to, like you're saying, tell a good story. And
Yeah.
here they it's definitely story first, ministry second.
Yeah.
And I think a good counterexample is something like War Room. I don't know if you ever saw War
I
Room.
did see War Room. Yeah.
So the thing about War Room is that they have a very interesting idea of creating these war rooms, and I like that spiritually. I think it's an interesting idea. But they were way more concerned with that ministry idea than actually telling like a good story. And you have in that you have Priscilla Shire yelling out to to God that, I put Satan behind me and you're not going to take my marriage, and that kind of thing. And that's not really something I can relate to, that's for sure. And that's not something, it's just so over the top.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I grew up in a more charismatic denomination. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of typical of what I've seen growing up
Mm-hmm.
in it. And yet, even for me, where, yeah, I've seen that before, where you're taking authority over the devil and you're putting him under your feet. Yeah, I've seen that. I get what you're saying, though, because there's still something in how it's presented in the film that even me, I kind of bristled a little bit. And I was like, yeah, I get what you're going for, but I guess I'm not feeling what you want me to feel in this moment. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like what you said. I feel like a lot of those movies, they care more about preaching the sermon than they do letting the story speak to your heart. And I think
Yeah.
with Christian, like when you go see a movie, you're not going to a movie to be preached at. You're going to be entertained, and you're going to watch a story told. And I think, if for instance, All Saints, it told the story. And because it told the story, I got ministered to, because I saw the example of this guy's faith, and I saw it turn out for the ultimate good, just not the way anybody pictured. So I got the message and I got the ministry because they just treated their audience normally and told me a story. And because I got involved in that story, I got what I was supposed to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, like in War Room, there's a scene where the old lady, basically she gets held up by some thug or whatever, and she ends up, instead of like any sensible person would do, would be to be afraid and to be on, like, to this she starts preaching to this guy, and it just feels so like inauthentic. It's such a cringeworthy scene.
Yeah.
And whereas this just feels way more grounded. Like the fact that that he kind of comes up against the council, his council, and they start out the movie with him giving his what do you call it, oath
Yep.
as a pastor, and him promising that he would obey even if he disagreed with them.
Yes.
And so that's going to come up later on in the movie, of course. And you have this council, and he says, it's about faith for me. And he says, faith in who? Yourself? And I think that also helps the movie, is that we have flawed characters. And a lot of faith-based films are afraid to make their Christian protagonists flawed.
Yes.
And it's people that make mistakes, that are selfish at times. But that's so much, to me, it's way more spiritual when you have flawed characters, because I can relate to that, because I'm a flawed character myself.
Yeah.
And I'm not always perfect. And so I think that that helps a lot in this film.
Oh yeah. What I liked about that whole thing is because you do see him kind of, go against the leadership in his church, but kind of not, but what's cool about it is they don't vilify even, the heads of the church. They actually make good points to this, brand new freshman pastor. They actually make solid points to him, like, no, look, here's why we have to sell this church. But he's also making solid points back, like, yeah, but isn't the call the people? And look at this whole group of people that we haven't reached out to, and now they're coming to us for help. And aren't we supposed to take care of the least of these? And what I really liked about that is, because you can even go into the book of Acts and look in the first church, all the sharp, and they had some sharp disagreements. I mean, Paul and Barnabas were like a team, and they ended up splitting because they had a sharp disagreement. But even when you read it in the book of Acts, you see how you can have that disagreement and still move on in unity. And what I like is this movie didn't take some of those church leaders and make them Pharisees and villains and all of that. They actually gave them good points. And I think what that shows is we're all human, trying so hard to follow God and do his will. And when we feel like we have that calling, how do we walk that out faithfully, especially with some of these other responsibilities? So the fact that they didn't vilify these characters and actually let that be a real conflict, I could relate to that. I've worked in ministry all my life. I did about 14 years working in Christian radio. And I know that I've had moments where I strongly disagreed with my leadership and then ultimately had to submit. But that didn't make my leadership villains, and that didn't make me a bad person because I disagreed. That's just life, and that's just humanity. And we just got to figure out how to deal with that prayerfully. So it was cool in this movie to get that dynamic and to see how they dealt with that and the compromises they came to.
Yeah, I really like that too, and that you have the whole message of that the one minister, the one pastor, that he thought that he was going to Africa to build a church, and he ended up building an aqueduct instead. They took
Yes.
the materials that were supposed to be for the chapel, and then they ended up building an aqueduct. And how often in life is God like that? That
Yeah.
the things that, I got an answer to prayer. We were supposed to build a church. That's a holy desire. That's a goodly desire. Why is this not working? Why are you not answering my prayer? And that's a pretty complex theme, I think, for a faith-based film to try to conquer. And I think it's all the better for it that the movie doesn't shy away from that.
Yeah.
And that I think that we can all relate to that in our lives of times where we were just so sure, and why is it not working? Why is it so hard? Like, why does it have to be so hard? And I mean, I definitely remember feeling that way as a missionary. There's sometimes that, it's just like, oh, why does it have to be so hard? Why does it have to be so cold? Why does it have to be so, or whatever it might be? And I think that again, God does not want weak saints, but also the ending result of whatever it is that God has called us to do may not be what we think it's going to be, even though it started with those steps. Like, he has his own plan. And so I don't know, it's something anyone can relate to that's a person of faith.
Yeah. See, again, by telling the story and not stopping to preach, I got more out of that. The whole aqueduct thing was the best analogy for the movie, because what you have is the fact that this pastor felt called to build the church, but that calling gave him all the materials he needed. And it was to build something that blessed those people, but it wasn't an actual church building. It was the aqueduct. And so God had actually called him there to bless those people, to build that aqueduct. And so he fulfilled his calling. And because of that calling, he ended up with the materials he needed. He just needed to assemble those materials different than he was picturing. And I'm watching that and just like, how often is it like that with life? Like, I feel like God has called me to do something and it's not working, but in truth it is. But I just need to expand my vision and see, what is God actually doing? He's called me to do this and he's given me the materials. But look at the actual need he's called me to. Now, what do I actually do with these materials that he's given me? And so I feel like that was an important picture in that movie, because that's the whole thing that our main pastor is just being driven by. He feels like he has to start this farm to save these people and bless these people. And yeah, that was his calling, but the result was different. Like, the people were blessed and a community was built. It was built, though, differently than he was picturing. And it's amazing how easy it is to get discouraged. We are on the right path, but because we see it way A, we are getting discouraged because God sees it way B. And God wants us to, continue on that path for that other way. And it's interesting. It's like, just one of those things where, watching this movie, I walked out of it with this sense of, this is the importance of prayer in our life, for getting that vision of God.
Yeah, when we have this Forrest character, of course, is like the grumpy old man kind of character, but he is a really important, I think, to the story, to help make he's a reminder to our pastor character that this is not about him and his ego, and that helps a lot. And he says to him, at first, he says that these people aren't here to pick your beans. They are here to be Americans. Are you here to ride the Corinne like these people have been rid their whole lives? You're a con man with a collar. And so for somebody in a movie like this to say something like that to our hero, and for him to not be a villain, again, speaks to this sort of the more subtlety of the writing that we have going on here compared to a typical faith-based film. And that he has to be sure all along that, this is not about kind of his ego, that he truly does, I think, have a love for these people, the Corinne people. And you see that even in the beginning when the police officers are there with the little child, and he says, you're out you're hitting a pastor. And I know I don't know, just think the way the movie handles conflict is so authentic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely, I feel like in a typical faith-based film, Forrest would have been vilified until he
Mm-hmm.
repented because he was getting in the way of the call of God. But like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I love just the authenticity in the fact that both the pastor and Forrest are wrong. They both weren't right. Like
Yeah.
that dude, Forrest, called the pastor on the fact that a lot of this was his ego, that he
Mm-hmm.
was picturing the end result of all the handshakes and stuff. And so the pastor did need to humble himself, ask for help, and consider what it meant to take the Karen and have them be farmers in this land. Like he needed to think that through, and he wasn't. As well as Forrest, he needed to soften himself a little bit. So I
Yeah.
loved the nuance of that because again, it shows the reality of like this is church life. This is really what it's like in church life. You feel like God has called you to do something, and then you feel like these people come up and they might be rough around the edges. So now they're like these stumbling blocks that Satan has thrown in your way to keep you from the call of God. But sometimes it's like, no, iron sharpens iron. Maybe God
Yeah.
has put this personality that's a little bit difficult and not perfect in your path because maybe there's something you need to consider from his perspective.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting how the movie presented that to us.
Yeah. And it really, I think the main message is that the unanswered prayers in your life, the things that you feel like you worked so hard, wise, and God blessing you in this worthy desire, this worthy goal, what is going on is that maybe he has a mission in store for what you're doing. Maybe he has something better. Here, the crops are all destroyed. I mean, when I think it's pretty devastating when all the sour leaf is because that
Oh,
was like the one last hope because there was this flood and they were going to be able to save everything with this sour leaf, and then it ends up getting destroyed in the sun when the car gets towed, and that's a pretty devastating moment, but in the end the church ends up getting declared a mission, and it ends up being a place that they say this place speaks to lost souls, and if they had not, I think if they had not been pushed so low, that would never happened. That would never, they say that faith precedes the miracle, and that's the case here, and and he ends up getting moved at the end to New York. They say he says you need more seasoning
yeah.
for this, but I really just I like that whole message that when it seems like God's not answering your prayers, maybe He's preparing a whole new mission
Oh,
for
yeah.
you that you don't even have the concept of.
Yeah, that scene where that bus got impounded
Yeah,
and they had all the leaf in there and they had all their hopes on that. I found my hopes were on that. Like
yeah,
every debt they have is going to get paid. This is it. This is the miracle. Here's the devil sending that flood, and now they saved as much of that crop as they could, and now it's going to save them. I'm so excited. But it's interesting because by following the story, I fell for the same trap that they did.
mm-hmm.
My hope wasn't built on God in that moment. It was built on them selling that leaf. And when that leaf was destroyed, I was so devastated in that scene. But then it doesn't take long after that where you see the real miracle. Like you said, God built a community. By building that community, he saved those people. Then that church got declared a mission, so they continued to have that place to go. And so it's like the miracle was there. It was just different than what everybody expected it to look.
Yeah,
And when you're going through it, it can be hard. Like you said, you are praying for the miracle. You have this specific vision, and you're like, God, why aren't you answering? But then it's like, well, let's take a step back and let's take a look. And I feel like that's what this movie shows us, is it shows us the untidiness of faith, how difficult it is to walk it out. But yet, by the end of the movie, we really do get a look at what God was doing, what he was doing through
yeah,
that farm, what he was doing through those people. It just wasn't at all what we imagined. It wasn't the ending we thought it was going to, but it was good nonetheless.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. That now this is a strong community, and that's another definite theme of the movie is the community of saints, and how even these people that speak different languages, these people that have very different life stories and situations, that through the spirit of God and having a combined goal of saving each other, literally of helping them to be able to eat, be able to live, and with this farm, how that really does uh, create that is a great power, and that they then have through all of they're able to get through all these tough times, and by the end they have this new mission, uh, this new powerful force to do good in their community, which is just really lovely. And that sometimes we can feel sort of fearful of those that we see as different, or that are that maybe don't speak the same language as we do, that aren't but if we can see them as God sees them, and then it will help to change the world. It'll be very powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a great message in that movie. It was just seeing what God was up to this entire time, and seeing their true discouragement, because it's like, I can relate to that. Yeah, I've
Mm-hmm.
been there. I've been in those places where I thought this was the answer,
Yeah.
but it's not. How could that not be the answer with all that I have felt called to do, where I was so sure you were speaking to me? But then in the end, we see where God is leading and what God is doing. And so I thought that was a powerful story and a powerful way to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, we covered. I mean, you have the like sort of the side plot with his wife and the choir, and I
Yep.
did kind of love, because I love "For the Beauty of the Earth." That is one of my favorite hymns. So it was kind of, that was sweet to hear them singing "For the Beauty of the Earth," and obviously that goes into the whole theme of the farm and
Yep.
everything, and trying to kind of inspire these young men, and who could have ended up in a gang or everything like that, because a lot of gangs prey on immigrant young men, and so them getting involved in the choir and was really sweet. And I liked their marriage too. I thought that it seemed pretty realistic,
Yep.
that she was often very frustrated with him, but they learned and grew as a couple, and that you could feel the stress of the money situation, you could feel the stress of the farm situation, the time situation, all that stuff, and also you have the whole situation with Yi Wang,
Yep.
Ewan, that him and his marriage falls apart with all of this,
Which
and
that scene was powerful
yeah.
because, when the pastor finds out that his friend and his wife broke up, he's like, why didn't you come to me? You're pastor. And kind of like how that was a hit to his ego, because as the pastor, shouldn't people be coming to me with those things? What does that say about me that he did? We've been working so close together and he wouldn't even come to me? Like, that was a powerful moment of him having to learn to deal with insecurity and offense.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know, I really like this movie. I think that it's definitely one of the best faith-based films to come out in a long time. And I definitely felt inspired watching it. I mean, it was a little bit hard to watch it because, we're in a spot where we can't be a part of a community of faith as far as, traditional congregation right now. And it kind of made me miss that a little bit.
Yep. It made me miss it too, for sure. But
Yeah.
it's still cool to look at it and just see like the move of God in that movie. The
Hmm.
movie does a good job of, you see it through the pastor's perspective, and you have the same expectation of the pastor, and therefore you start to feel the same disappointments until the end, where you see how God was orchestrating things and putting things together. And so it did kind of speak to me too here in this troublesome time where it's like, why are we going through such a tough time? And why? But Romans 8:28 says God takes all things and makes them work together for the good of those who love him.
Mm-hmm.
So as we continue to love him and pursue him, we may not understand everything that's going on around us, but we can know his promises and know that he's with us even in the midst of that.
Yeah. This is maybe a silly example, but it was kind of thinking about it this week that I was really sad about Broadway being canceled for the whole year. And I was just feeling really down about it. And I felt like it was such a tender mercy that what do we get at the end of this week? We get Hamilton, which is a Broadway play, that makes everybody feel better. And I thought that was there was like a beautiful sort of symmetry about that the one thing I was feeling the most sad about is the one thing that makes me feel the most happy. And so I think that sometimes we have to have faith, and that's when faith gets hard, is that sometimes it's like, we really are going back into quarantine. We're going back into lockdown. Are you kidding me? But what are you doing? But we have to have that faith.
Yeah. The thing is I think I said this once before, but as we're going through this stuff, something that I've always looked at is John 10:10, because Jesus lays things out pretty clear in John 10:10. He says, it's the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And so I look at the world around us with COVID-19 and I think, okay, here's the thief all around everywhere. Where's that abundant life? But when we press into him and actually take that time to talk to him, we will be surprised. Kind of like, that's what I loved about All Saints, is watching that guy's journey and how he was surprised in the end, how God was using him and how God truly used him. And so that's the revelation I think we need to look for in this time. How can we be truly used by God? And we might have all of these expectations. It might come out this way and it might come out that way, which might lead to us feeling disappointed if it doesn't come out this way or that way. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how God uses us. And if we could just take that step back and let God be God, and just take that step back and just let him move through us, it'll be amazing to see what can be accomplished.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I even think about that with doing these Sunday devotionals, because I felt really inspired to do them. And, sort of in my own conceit, I guess, I thought, that people will be really looking for spirituality in this tough time. Like, they will want to be spiritually fed. And to be honest, they haven't done all that well. They haven't gotten that many views, which is fine. But I don't know. It's times it could feel like, why did I feel so prompted when people aren't enjoying it and people aren't getting what I wanted them? But I then you'll have like these little moments, but we'll have a comment where what we said, it really impacted a person, and watching it, or even just like within my own family, I'll hear from like my mom and dad that they were really touched by it. And I think that then you realize that maybe that's all that we've been asked to do, is to do something on that day that impacted that one person, or even just you and I, that he maybe that's what was important. And if that's all we do, then that's important. Like, we had a really great comment from last week's episode from looking deeper into the movies that he's been following every week. And if that's all that we're doing is impacting him, that's huge.
Yep.
Because the worth of one soul is great in the eyes of God. And so that, I don't know, it's kind of similar to, he thinks, why isn't this working the way that it should be working? But again, God has a different perspective than all of us.
Yep. Yeah, no, yeah, and I think that's a great illustration, because sometimes we start things like this with that in mind, and we think, yeah, this will get hundreds of views because I'm filling this need. And
Yeah.
30 views in, it's like, are you serious? Why did I put all that work into it? But then you get the one comment and you go,
yeah,
that's right. All of this is worth it, even just for the one. And so it's amazing how God will help shift our perspective to realize, like, yeah, sometimes we do have that picture in our mind. Yeah, this is going to be hundreds of thousands of views and tons of thumbs up, and we're going to get all kinds of happy comments. I only got one? God's like, yeah, I wanted you to do it for that one person.
right.
And I think like that's something we always got to remember with God. You know, it's easy. That's why we walk by faith and not by sight. Like that thought just hit me. We walk by faith and not by sight. And if we continue to go by sight, no wonder we're going to be so discouraged. It ain't going to go exactly how we think. But when we walk by faith and we let ourselves see it through God's perspective, we can find more encouragement than we thought when things aren't looking the way we imagined they would.
Yeah. It's kind of like the that old Garth Brooks song. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers, and that just because He doesn't answer doesn't mean He isn't there. Yep. And that in the song he sees his old girlfriend that he thought for sure that he prayed and prayed and prayed that things would work out, and then they didn't. And where was God? And he was frustrated as a young man. And then as an older person, he sees her and realizes that that God had a different plan. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and we should always try to remember. And that's when faith is hard. Faith can be very difficult, but it's important, and we get rewarded in the end if we step into take that leap of faith, like we've talked about before. So yeah, I really enjoy All Saints. I think it's a very solid film, and so let us know if you enjoyed this, because there are some other good ones that we could talk about. If you like it, let us know, and yeah, we'll consider it, and maybe share in the comment section if you've seen this movie, what did you think of it, and also if you have some favorites, let us know in the comment section. That would be great. And Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me right here on YouTube. My channel is called Durbania. I'm the only channel with that name, so you search it, you'll find me. I do a lot of stuff like movie reviews, ranking videos. My favorite is this thing called a theological analysis. I love to find God in movies and find that as a way to minister. Awkwardly enough, as we were just talking about, those theological analyses are the ones I put the most work into, and I feel like they get the lowest views. But when those comments come in, I'm telling you, it's like, yep, that's why I do those. And so check those out. I love the interaction I get on those videos, and I would love to have your thoughts and have you join me in that conversation.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. You guys should check it out. It's really, really good. And you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check that out. I would really appreciate it. And I'm at the Hallmarkies podcast, and we have a great week coming up for Hallmarkies. So I definitely think you should subscribe and check that channel /podcast out. And so thanks so much, Chris. This was great. And I hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.